I guess we're ready to go here. Welcome, everybody. If you're new to the Windham County Genealogy Interest Group, we'll put you on the email list so you get the rest of our emails. We meet about, I don't know, maybe 4 times a year on Zoom, and you'll get notified of that. And if you feel like it, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Just click on the chat icon and you can introduce yourself. Maybe, you know, the surnames you're working on genealogy wise, any, you know, any other interests you might have genealogically speaking. You can also say where you're from. That would be good too. I'm Jerry Carboni, and if you've been in Brattleboro long enough, you'll recognize my name. I was the library director for some years at Brooks Memorial Library, and then after retirement, my long-held retirement life 2.0 quest was to do genealogy. So, and then we have today, as always, Wayne Blanchard, who is kind of a co-conspirator in our little ad hoc organization here. He helps with all of this. And today we have Michael Bosworth, who's volunteered to tell us a little bit about his research. And we welcome anybody who wants to participate directly in the membership here. Just let us know if you'd like to talk about your research, and we'll schedule you for a future session. So I guess that's about it. I put up an agenda. I think it's still up there. I hope. Maybe it isn't. Is there an agenda? Yeah. Okay, good. So that's going to be.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So that's what we're going to follow today. And one of the things here is just the announcement. We're pretty sure we're going to be at the Windham County Historical Society Fair on August 10th. So that'll probably be our next meeting, which will be in person. So if you're in the area, like to attend, we'll try to come up with some interesting presentation. Wayne will bring his RV, and we set up a little screen with a video projector, and we do something up there. And there's a lot of other things happening that day, so we hope for a nice day, no rain, and there'll be other exhibits as well, and demonstrations throughout the day. So it's real fun to go up. So we'll start off with
wait a minute, Jerry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want a couple of, while we're on announcements.
Yeah,
there's a couple of things that I'm going to come up with later, but fold3.com, which is a website with a lot of military records, pension records, and military service records. It's free this week because of Memorial Day. Yeah, I think you do need to register, but if you have anything that you're researching that involves somebody that served, it's especially good for like Civil War records and that type of thing. Anyway, just want to let people know that that was there. And the other thing, I got a notice that newspapers.com, which is a big newspaper website, is having a 25% off sale right now. So, and I was going to mention that later too.
Yeah, good point.
What I use, how I use that.
Good points. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for interjecting that. Also, and people probably know this, that through the Vermont State Archives, using a link that they provide, you can get free access to newspapers.com for Vermont newspapers. And once our presentations begin, I'll put the link in the chat for people, because that's a really valuable resource that BSARA offers Vermonters. And also, there's something from Ancestry.com too, right? Wayne? Am I
Oh,
remembering that right or not?
I don't know about that one.
For-
They've been having
yeah,
sales for their DNA thing for
right,
Mother's Day and so forth. I
right.
don't,
Yeah, I think it might be
I
Vermont
didn't.
Vital might be Vermont Vital Records.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, on the free access. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I
yeah,
thought
the
you
free
meant
access.
just other,
Yeah,
yeah, no, right. Ancestry, it's through the Vermont
yeah,
Archives.
yeah.
So Vermont records are available to us for free, and as well as that
Right.
newspaper.
Newspapers.com. Right, right. Thanks for bringing that up because
Yeah.
I had forgotten about that. Yeah, good. Okay, if there are no more announcements, I'm going to stop my share here. And if other people, if you haven't muted yourself, please do. I can do it for you. But I feel a little funny doing that, so please do it yourself, and that way we'll not have any, distractions once Michael begins his presentation. So I'm going to stop my share here, and I guess we're ready to go. And if you do have questions, put them in the chat. Just wait till we're done, and you can ask them at that point.
So this is my grandfather, my father's father, William Bosworth. He is a grandfather I actually never knew. He died in 1937, so about 11 and a half years before I died. So I had good incentive to find out more about him. And this particular image I have in my private collection, him as, I'm not sure exactly what age, but as a fairly young man. And in this quest to find out more about him, I sort of view my co-conspirators as my aunt Marguerite, who did a lot of genealogical research well before anybody else in our family. And she's passed away a number of years. Also, my cousin Charles Bosworth, currently living down in North Carolina, did a bunch as well. So they have been helpful. So let me just. So this is the result of my Aunt Marguerite's work. She did her work, a lot of it before there was an internet at all, before there was anything online. So she did a lot of, going sometimes town to town or just finding stuff in libraries. But she developed a multi-generation pedigree timeline chart of, she focused on the Bosworths, although she did some for other branches of the family as well. So here is her entry for my grandfather, William Ezra Bosworth. And she knew that his father was Hiram Edward, and his mother was Mary Ann Bosworth, whose maiden name was Nagel. So second of two children, attended the Boston Conservatory of Music, and was a restaurateur for a number of years in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Also on the Board of Aldermen of Holyoke. Holyoke has a mayor and a Board of Aldermen. He was on the Board of Aldermen for many years, and he died of a heart attack in 1937. And I'm not sure if all of you can see it, but down below is also that my grandfather had one sibling. His nickname was Nellie. Her actual name was Ellen, but her nickname was Nellie. So this presentation is actually focused on the early part of my grandfather's life, basically till he was about 20. Because I actually already knew a bunch about his later life. My dad told me about the restaurants he had in Holyoke. My dad told me about the time he spent on the Board of Aldermen, that my grandfather did those years. And I know I have a copy of the obituary and the circumstances of his death. So I knew a lot about that part, but I knew very little about the early part. I did know he was originally from Willimantic, Connecticut, but I didn't know much more than that. I had in my mind at the time I started this research that he and his parents and sister moved from Willimantic to Holyoke around 1900. I didn't know much more than that. So, oops. All right, let me. All right. So I didn't really feel like I had to verify everything that my aunt Marguerite did, but here is just one example. I could get access to the record of his birth. And so it verifies everything she had on her little chart, his actual date of birth and his parents, etc. All right, so where I was just trying to think this through logically, where could I find out maybe more about his life? And so I um, looked into the census records, which you can do via family search as well as other online search engines. And I was able to come up with a record for 1880. And you can't read that at this, it's too dim for you to read that here. But trust me when I say the household was listed in 1880, starting with Hiram's mother, Lucretia, who would have been my grandfather's grandmother, obviously, and then Hiram himself, who was listed as a spool turner, and Marianne, my grandfather's mother and Hiram's wife, listed as works in silk mill. So both of them were in Willimantic working in the mills there. It also says that William is 2 years old at the time, 1880, probably very close to 3, and Nellie, his sister, is 7. So, all right, now I have a little bit more information I didn't know before, just as far as, their occupations. And so from there, well, this just gives you a little bit better idea of my grandfather's parents. Again, these are images from my private collection that have been handed down to me. Hiram was from a family of Bosworths who came over in the 1630s. Marianne was from a family of Irish who came over in the early 1800s. Interestingly, I haven't been able to confirm this, but I believe this is the point where the Bosworth family that I'm part of became Catholic after many years as Protestants. After coming over as Puritans, we became Catholics. And I know my dad was brought up as a Catholic. His dad was brought up as a Catholic. I was brought up as a Catholic, although I'm no longer practicing one. But it was this marriage that actually brought about that change. Pretty sure. Don't know for certain, but I think so. All right. So then where to find out more? When I was doing this, I didn't know it really until I started doing this about the city directories that you can get access to through the Ancestry database search engine. Ancestry is not free. You have to pay for it or go to the library. The Brooks and the Rockingham libraries have, I think, a joint subscription, so you can go there and access these old directories. So here I was able to find one from 1880. This is the Willimantic directory where Hiram Bosworth is listed, my great-grandfather. Unfortunately, this didn't in itself tell me much more other than that he lived. His home was on Union Street near Jackson Street. So there was no number, but I've long loved looking at maps, studying maps. Some time ago, I learned about what are called the Sanborn fire insurance maps. And so, which are available online for free through the Library of Congress. So I was able to track down this image from Willimantic from 1877. And these fire insurance maps are great things to look at if you like this stuff, because they show the footprints of the different buildings. They show a pretty good approximation of where the roads were. So just this one map, and I'm not sure if you can see my pointer at all, but down in the lower left is where Jackson Street and Union Street come together. So from the previous research, I knew that they lived right near that intersection. I didn't know which building. It could have been several buildings here, but I knew it was right near there. So what did that tell us about their lives? It told us they lived quite near the railroad tracks. And so trains were probably a very daily occurrence in their life, maybe at night too, I don't know. So that was part of what it was just part of their lives. Down at the bottom of this map, you can't see it too well. This is image 5 from the Sanborn maps for Willimantic. There are other images you can look at, but down at the bottom in blue are the outlines of some industrial buildings at the time, and they were part of the Willimantic Linen Company. And it was a big company, eventually got bought by American Thread. At one point was the largest thread company in the world. So when my great-grandfather Hiram was listed as a spool turner, it's quite likely that he was working there. And if you ever get a chance to visit Willimantic, they're really a beautiful set of these stone buildings still there. They're no longer in heavy industrial use, but pretty nice to look at. My great-grandmother, Mary Ann, worked in a silk mill, nothing as large as the Willimantic Linen Company. There, I could find on some of these maps some silk mills, but I just had no idea which one. But this all helped me get a little closer to what their lives were like. So just going back again to what are my goals here? This is again from my Auntie Marguerite's pedigree timeline. And I have circled or outlined in green the parts I focused on for this talk, because these are really the parts that are from my grandfather's earlier life. So now I found out more about Willimantic. How about the Boston Conservatory of Music? And how did he become a piano tuner? I knew he was a piano tuner at one point, but basically this was all I knew from Annie Marguerite's timeline. And Boston Conservatory of Music, which school is that? I went searching on the regular web for Boston Conservatory of Music, and there was nothing that exactly matched that name. It had two different schools come up, the Boston Conservatory of Music, the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley, and then the New England Conservatory. So I didn't know if either of these two is the one that my grandfather went to. And I was very interested in finding out, can I find out more? So this is also, when I was doing this, it was 2020, the height of the COVID pandemic. So these archive departments were not actually open. Some of the archivists were working from home. So I went to the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley website. I emailed the link to the archive department, and Janae Force responded, said they could not find anything about William Bosworth here, but referred me to the archivist at the New England Conservatory Archive Department, Mary Alice Parent Moore. And next slide will show what she was able to find. And this was a great moment when I received this. I mean, this is basically an index card sized record for my grandfather. And it tells a lot. It tells at the time, he tells when he was going to the conservatory, which was 1897. It tells that he was living at 46 Bond Street in Holyoke at the time. So one of the things that told me is that the family moved from Willimantic to Holyoke earlier than I had thought. They actually moved at least as early as 1897. And then it lists the different sections of instruction that he took. So piano tuning, 4 different sections of piano tuning from OCF, and 2 sections of something called HAR period, R period, 0 period, R period, O period, also from OCF. So untangling all of this would take a little bit more work. But one of the other things that the archivist at Boston Conservatory of Music sent me was a link to an online catalog from 1897 to 98 for the New England Conservatory of Music. And here's the link itself. There you will find the building at the time of the New England Conservatory. The New England Conservatory is no longer located here, but it's on Franklin Square in Boston. And this online catalog was 126 pages, all available to read. On page 9, OCF, Oliver C. Faust, principal of the tuning department. So I found an awful lot from, just this one resource at the New England Conservatory. A year or so later, my wife Naomi and I would take a walk around Boston and actually come across this building. It's still there. It's not the New England Conservatory anymore, but still very much there. I think it's private apartments, and the building looks the same as does the park pretty much. Yeah. Okay, so all that was good to find out. How about the HAR.R.O part of that? I didn't know what that meant, and nowhere in the catalog did explain those initials, that abbreviation. Mary Alice Perrin Moore, the archivist, thought, well, maybe the RO means reed organs. And then it suddenly occurred to me, we have an organ museum in Brattleboro. And I knew Barbara George, she's the founder of the museum. So I emailed her, who thought it could definitely stand for reed organ. And she has a person, Ned Phoenix, she knew about in Townsend, who might have some thoughts about it. So I emailed Ned, and his response was probably short for harmoniums and reed organs. So harmoniums are the European variety, and reed organs that were the type of organs Esty generally made. So here I found out that my grandfather not only got training in piano tuning, but also apparently in harmoniums and reed organs. So I went to just try to confirm some of this. And around this timeline, wanting to know, all right, they were in Holyoke at least as early as 1897. Could I find out anything more definitive of that? And so I went back to Ancestry and actually found the directory, Holyoke directory from 1885, where it lists Hiram, my grandfather's father, as living on Bond Street and working at Merrick Thread. So they were in Holyoke much earlier than I thought they were. They had moved there in 1885. And you know, there are directories from the subsequent years that said the same thing. They were in Holyoke. The last directory entry from Willimantic for Hiram was 1884. So 1885 must have been, or sometime in that year, 2 years when they moved to Holyoke. And so I could find out in 1898, Hiram Bosworth is listed again, then working at Far Alpaca Company. He was being housed at 48 Bond Street, and his son, my grandfather, now listed in directory as the piano tuner. He'd gotten trained in 1897. Now actually must have been doing piano tuning because he was listed in this directory. These directories, the ones I've looked at, pretty much focus on people's employment. Sometimes you find women listed, but not very often. I never found my great-grandmother listed, Mary Ann. I'm not sure whether when they moved to Holyoke, she kept working in the mills, but I do have an old photo that shows her with a group of women in front of a mill that might have been from this time, but I have no other document confirming that. All right. So Bond Street. Going back to the Sanborn fire insurance maps that you can get online through the Library of Congress in 1884. This is basically Bond Street is, if you can see that, it's close to the right. It's up and down. And you can also see the outline of a number of tenement homes in the area. And the Bosworths lived right around this intersection, sort of in the middle right. So their housing was tenement housing. They also, once again, after the move to Holyoke, lived quite close to the railroad tracks. And the trains must have been part of their daily life. And didn't have to walk too far to get to some of the mills, which are right on the other side of the railroad tracks. And just off to the right of this particular image is where one of the canals, industrial canals in Holyoke was located. Holyoke, like Bellows Falls, has industrial canals. They have a more elaborate system down in Holyoke, and this was one of those canals. Up in the upper left, there is actually a second congregational church. Now, Hiram apparently was no longer a Congregationalist, but I wonder if he thought about it at the time. So it must have been they probably went to some Catholic church in Holyoke. All right. We're going back to my Aunt Marguerite's chart. Just one thing to note, her chart again said Boston Conservatory of Music. That's a little misleading because as far as anything I can determine, it was actually the New England Conservatory. But the other thing that I didn't know much about at all, other element, is my grandfather's sister, Nellie. And how to find out more. Let's see. Here's a photo that I do have in my collection with brother and sister. I'm just guessing this is 1885, 86, 87, just based on, William Bosworth looking like he might be a 10-year-old or something. Probably not long after the family had moved to Holyoke. But again, mysterious Nellie, because I never knew anything about Nellie earlier than this, other than her name. I talked about at the beginning, my cousin Charlie Bosworth, living down in North Carolina. He had an early interest in family genealogy. And my wife Naomi and I visited him and his wife Kathy a couple of years ago. And Charlie was in the mood to actually grant me some of the things in his possession. And one of them was an autograph book of Nellie's. I'm sorry, signature, yeah, autograph or signature book of Nellie's. Apparently, she began around 1887. And a bunch of the entries early on, at least, are sort of school friends. Later on, the entries become more her work associates in the Skinner silk mill in Holyoke, which I think she started working in about 1890 or 91. So I have since given this autograph book to the Holyoke Library. Anybody who has relatives living in Holyoke who might want to see whether their ancestors actually signed Nellie's autograph book could go look if they're interested. Okay. And on one of the pages is simply a little writing from her brother, William or Willie. Someone love, some love, I'm sorry, love, some love one, some love two. I love one, and that is you. To Nellie from your brother, Master William Bosworth. So this was 1889 when he would be 12 years old. She would be about 17. One of the other things that my cousin Charlie gave me was a computer printout who looked to be from yet another cousin doing some research. And it had listed on that page, on a page, Nellie Bosworth Begley, and that she died in childbirth. So again, I didn't know anything about that. So by going to some of the vital records they can get to on via family search, I was able to track down the marriage of Nellie, or Ellen is her proper name, to John Begley in September of 1896. He was a commercial painter, and now she's listed as at home. Maybe once they got married, she wasn't working in the silk mill anymore. So that's in 1896. Some 10.5 months later, from the birth registry from the city of Holyoke, there is the birth of Helen Bosworth Begley, June 22nd, 1897. So they had a child. That was good news. And then from the registry of death in 1897, Ellen Bosworth Begley died on June 27th. So 5 days later, cause listed as puerperal eclampsia, which is a type of problem that can happen at birth. And back then, of course, the methods for dealing with such things were a lot more primitive. So she must have gone through 5 days of pretty painful, but eventually dying. And I could look up part of that word, eclampsia, online explanation. I couldn't quite find the full explanation. So I got confirmation from a certified nurse midwife friend of mine, who was also by oddity, first name of Ellen. So, and then in January of the following year, 7 months later, the child had died of pneumonia. So sort of a tragic ending. And how was my grandfather with all this? I mean, this is his only sibling. must have been very close to her, must have affected him. I don't know. I don't have any hand-me-downs or anything written about how he was feeling. But I try to put it all sort of in context. This is a timeline I think is very reasonable to assume based on my research. You know, my grandfather's parents got married 1871. They worked in the mills in Willimantic. Nellie was born 1872. My grandfather 1877. By 1885, they moved to Holyoke. 1891 or earlier, Nellie was working at the Skinner Silk Mill. 1896, the marriage of John Begley and Nellie. 1897, birth of their daughter. But then she dies, Nellie dies. So remember, 1897 was also when my grandfather was going to the New England Conservatory. I haven't been able to determine whether all of his studies were in the fall of 1897 or started actually at the beginning of 1897. But obviously the death of his sister must have been weighing heavily on him. It might have helped him to be going through such studies at the time. He could get his mind off of this, but it was very much probably a heavy emotional time in his life. And to top that off, then the child of his sister died in the January. And my grandfather would continue to be a piano tuner for the next 12 to 13 years. And here he is as an adult, 300-pound adult. So it was one of his well-known characteristics. So, but his adult life is a different sort of story, not for today. All right. Oh, that's it. Thank you.
All right.
Take
Michael,
any questions if people
that was
have
really
them.
fascinating. I love that you were able to find so much about what he did for work and so forth.
Mhm.
I had not tried to do much with those fire maps, but I could see where it really kind of helps give a context to where the family was living and what it was like there at that time.
Mhm.
It's great.
Great work, Michael, using a variety of resources, including some that, get overlooked, like archive.org and the city directories, which are important for finding people in between census years. It
Yeah.
identifies households and occupations and where they lived. So yeah, it's really good. Really good. Really good work.
Was terrific. Thank you very much, Michael. That
Welcome.
a lot of the things you did, I feel that I could bring to the study of some of my ancestors, and especially the stuff about where they were in certain mills and all. Because I know one of my great-grandmothers worked in a certain mill in a certain town, and it would be interesting to explore it more. Thank you.
Yeah,
It was
I think
great.
most of the larger towns are industrial villages even will have Sanborn maps, not all of them, but I think most of them.
Great information. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, I posted a live link to the Library of Congress collection. So if people want to click on that and bookmark it for later, more than welcome to do that.
If there are no more questions, I will stop sharing. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Okay. Wayne, you want to start yours?
All right. Okay.
Okay, cool.
I'll do that. Why don't I have? There we go. All right. Okay. Some of the things I'm going to do, actually, Michael covered very well there. And he had much better luck than I did in terms of actually finding something. So I'm sure we all, if you've done this at all for any length of time, you run into ancestors that are just difficult to find, to find all the pieces, if you will. So here's where we start. We had somebody contact the library. I volunteer there every Thursday morning. Just trying to help people figure out, the same kind of thing we're doing now, just figuring out what we can find about a family member. So here's the information that we started with. The fellow's name is Ralph Parker Smith. That he was born in Vermont about 1795. He married a woman named Ruth. They had 4 children, and they were all born in Stockholm, New York. So that's Darius, Albert, Hiram, and Myron. They moved to Cleveland, Minnesota, and he died there in 1879. So the challenge is to figure out where he was actually born, who his parents were, and what Ruth's maiden name was, and who her parents were. So in doing any of this, we need to start with what we actually know. So I was able to find a register of his death in Cleveland, Minnesota. So we know that he died on the 3rd of April, 1879 in Cleveland. And he was 83 years, 10 months old at that time. So just working backwards, we know he was born about 1795. He was widowed. It's interesting, in this township, they recorded when a person came to Minnesota. So he came in 1856, and that was actually, he must have been one of the earliest settlers in that area, because this town of Cleveland, or maybe it's a city now, it was not really a place until shortly after that time, from what I looked at online. He was a farmer, and unfortunately, where this record would have solved the first problem right away, over on here on the right, where it should have had his parents' names, there's nothing there. It's blank. So then I turned to census records, trying to figure out, what I could find. These early census records are difficult because it only listed the head of the household, and it only gave a count of who was in the household. But here, right away, we can see, again, I'm going on basically the fact that his name was Ralph Smith and that he was in Stockholm, New York. So even that might be a little iffy, since we don't, normally with a census record, if you have other people in the family, you can try to help confirm that you're looking at the right person. But in this case, there's a total of 9 people in the household. And so, as I said, the information we had at the start was that there were only 4 children, but it looks like there might well have been more, although here again, we don't know that these were, this is just people in the household. So we don't know exactly that they were the children. However, some of them are young. One is, a boy, but somewhere between 5 and 9, another boy between 10 and 14, another one 15 to 19. So, you know, you can kind of guess that these were probably children in the household. And this is the father, a male 40 to 49. And then the same thing with the girls in the family, one that's 5 to 9, one 10 to 15, 15 to 19, 20 to 29, and then probably the mother here. But anyway, those are still sort of guesses, really, what's going on. 1850, of course, is much more helpful. So this, we can see Ralph and Ruth living in Stockholm, New York at this point. And we have several possibilities here of children. The thing that struck me here was that there's huge gaps, but in the ages, if they are the children. I mean, supposedly Darius here is a son who was 28, but then we have Hiram and Myron are, 16 and 11. And there was no mention of Mary, who would, if she is a child of them, she would be the oldest. So there's a lot, that raises other questions about, who all these kids, are these children of the family or are they other relatives? They're all named Smith. Just complicates it. So with a couple of pieces of information there, we know they were in Stockholm, New York in 1850, and according to that death record, moved to Minnesota in 1856. So he should have been in the 1855 New York State Census. New York is really pretty helpful in that way, in that it did several. There are several New York Census records on the 5-year, in between the federal census. Anyway, so I searched in there, didn't find anything. Couldn't find him in there. And then it occurred to me that, well, I ought to check and see just what actually is in the database. And then it turns out in the fine print down here, there are 13 counties where there's no information in this database on ancestry. And one of those counties was St. Lawrence, and that's where Stockholm is located. So that's which explains why I couldn't find it online anyway. So then 1860, the next federal census, we see them in Minnesota. And at this point, we have Ralph, Ruth, and what we assume is his son Hiram here. That census doesn't help us a whole lot, other than confirming that they were in Minnesota. In 1870, it lists Hiram first, and what you can assume is probably his wife and 2 children, and then we have Ralph here, and it does very helpfully say with son. So it's kind of a confirmation that Hiram is Ralph's son. Find a grave, I've mentioned before, is a very useful site in terms of looking for burial records. In this case, the person that created this says that he was born in June of 1795, and I was not able to find anything that confirms that. We already knew about his death, so that that was good, and the cemetery is listed there. Just kind of confirmation. I believe there was a picture of his headstone on the website too. So I wasn't getting too far going that way. So one of the recommendations is that to find more about a person, is search out the rest of the family and search out, people that are associates of them, of the person you're looking for. So in this case, I decided, well, let me see what else I can find about these children that we started with anyway, the 4 that we started with. So here's one of the sons. He, again, I think this is also off of Find a Grave. I'd like to. This is a veterans memorial stone, so which is very helpful because it tells you how he served in the military. The information here is off the Find a Grave website. So in terms of when he was born, he died in 1917, where he's buried. The information here, though, can lead you to searching out military records, and especially in this case, also looking for pension records. On the obituary that I found, it again gave some additional information that he served in this 1st Minnesota Mounted Rangers Company B. The other picture up here on the upper left is an application for a headstone for a veteran. So again, it gives you some confirmation about where he's buried, and well, we saw the stone there, but if you didn't have the stone, these application forms can help to just to verify information about the person, about his death, and about where he's buried. As I mentioned at the start, this Fold 3 is a useful website. I didn't have a subscription to it, or I had one in the past, but I don't have one now. So I wasn't able to look him up on there, but that would be a place to look. I was able to find this pension index card, and these are particularly helpful numbers down here where it says certificate number, because with that number, you can actually get his entire record. The tricky part is, the last time I checked, Fold 3 was still in the process of digitizing Civil War records. So the record might be there, it might not be on the website. If it's not, the information on this card is enough to find, to actually see his record. So the certificate number is really helpful, but of course here it also includes, what unit he served in. The other difficult thing in this case is that he evidently outlived his wife, because there is no, down here where it says widow, there's nothing there. So if he had died before she did, she probably would have also applied for to continue with his pension. And those records are really valuable because a widow had to prove that that she was married, when they were married, how long they were married, and so forth. Anyway, so it's only partially there, but what I was hoping to find, if there had been more information, I believe I got this pension card off of Ancestry. If there'd been more of a pension record there, what I was really hoping to find was an actual birth record, a birth record for Myron here, because it might have given his mother's name. again, what I'm trying to come up with were suggestions of places to look. Some somewhat similar information. Hiram also served in a different unit, but served from Minnesota in the Civil War. This one was interesting to me because the other information we had is that he died before 1900, but this is a 1908 application. The other thing that's odd is, assuming I have the right person, but it seemed like a lot of things here, that it gives his name as Hiram Smith, that his place of birth was Stockholm, New York, date of birth matched. He was a widower. He had 4 kids. None of them, I mean, they were all adults. But this is an application for basically a soldier's home in Washington State. So I don't know how that came about. The only other hint we have here is that he listed a nearest relative as a George H. Smith, who lived in Washington, in Puyallup, Washington. So anyway, it kind of raises more questions than it answers, but it does give the information about his service in the military, and it does give a pension number. Again, with some of that information, you could go to the National Archives, request his service record and the pension file. Which again, the hope would be to find the parents' names. Now, the 1890 census, for the most part, does not exist, but there is a special 1890 veterans schedule that does exist. So Hiram Smith is listed there. Again, it shows where he served, when he served, his length of service. At the bottom of this form, there's a place for additional information, but there wasn't anything there about him. Sometimes it's kind of a weird setup for this census record. They list everybody at the top of the form, and then they list the numbers of each individual again at the bottom, and add other notes. But in his case, there was nothing there. Just a summary of his military service that again just confirms information that we know about that. Where he enlisted, what unit he was in, so forth, and that he survived Civil War. The siblings here, for the same reason, trying to find, the idea would be to try to find as much information about each child as you could, like a birth record, a marriage record, a death record. Any of those things might lead to the information that we're looking for in terms of who his parents were, where actually they were born, or that kind of thing. In this case, all I found was what do you call it? An index, basically, but it does give a death certificate number. So maybe these records aren't online, but in New York State, you could request, especially with having the death certificate number, you could request a copy of the death certificate, which would be worth, I mean, if I was researching this family for myself, it would be worth sending for those records. There is a difference in New York State, by the way. New York City records it would be a separate place to request records versus the rest of the state of New York. Same thing with Albert. I did find a newspaper clipping about him indicating that he died because he was kicked by a horse and hit his head and died from the injuries. That there was no will, and the intestate probate was filed by his son. Again, I'm not pursuing these things because it's not what I was trying to do is help somebody else and give them some hints about where to look for information. So again, the death certificate here would be useful to get a hold of. Okay, so then one of the other things I like to see is what have other people found about the same family. So in this case, it's a little side trip. There was a hint that perhaps his father's name was Alan Smith. So in searching in Vermont, there's an excellent database of early Vermont settlers by this Scott Bartley. So I found a profile of Simon Bradford, and it contains information about Alan Smith and this Deborah Bradford. The Bradfords lived in Springfield and were one of the early settlers of Springfield, Vermont. The Smiths evidently moved in shortly after that. It indicate, as it says here, they were married somewhere between 1794 and 1801. So again, this information about this particular one is a little sketchy. But one of the interesting things here, there were they were both big families, but 4 of the Bradford kids married into the same 5th Smith family, those 4 siblings. So there's a lot of other family that could be checked out here in terms of trying to find if this Alan Smith and Deborah Bradford are the parents of Ralph who we're looking for. It might be found in some of the other people in either of these families. Searching, like, for example, searching probate records to see if somebody has left something in a will to one of the, somebody else in the family. So anyway, it was a hint. I tried to pursue it a little bit, but I did not get too far with that. The thing that really struck me, of course, is that there's a lot of hesitancy in this particular description. Some of these things are carefully documented. And in fact, I highly recommend anything that he's done because there's pretty thorough documentation to everything he puts there. But it is kind of, likely son of Isaac and Mary, because other siblings were also, could be verified as sons of or daughters of Isaac and Mary Briggs. And they ended up in Stockholm, New York. So that was the only thing I had to go on, that I thought, well, this might be the family if you can find, if you can find something else about their heritage. So in terms of finding things that other people have done, this is a page about the Bradford family in a book on Mayflower, or a database here, but there's actual books of Mayflower deeds and probates. So it lists this Simon Bradford, where he came from, a little bit about his estate. It does list all of his kids. What evidently, if you see down here, Deborah of Bradford is listed as Bradford, but her sister Ruth is married as a Smith, wife of James. So again, they were all marrying into the same family. One of the things that, well, it's useful for this if you really, if you're able to make all the connections, obviously this family can trace themselves back. And I don't think it's necessarily through the Bradfords, but I think probably through his wife. Back to a Mayflower passenger. So again, these lineage societies require you to prove everything from yourself back to, in this case, a Mayflower passenger, or the other lineage societies are very similar. If you wanted to go back to Daughters of the American Revolution, you would, again, there would be extensive documentation and proof to show how you're related. I did take a look at, you can, like, for example, on Family Search, you can find Simon Bradford's death records, probate records. It didn't add anything else to it because it was, as I said, evidently Deborah and Alan Smith must have gotten married after her father died, because she's listed as a Bradford, not a Smith. I thought, well, maybe I could find something about in church records. So I tried searching, and again in Family Search, and then popped up with this message that, yes, we have images, but they are restricted. So again, a reminder to folks, I think I've mentioned this before, that both the libraries in Brattleboro and Rockingham are affiliate libraries. So you can actually just take your own computer, but you need to be in the library on the library's network. And then all of these blank images would pop up, and you could actually see what is in them. So again, kind of a dead end for me because I wasn't pursuing that, but again, just a reason that if you run into this on Family Search, you just need to go into the nearest affiliate library, or the Family Search centers that the Mormon Church has. So I switched to newspapers, see what I could find there. One of the things that came up that really intrigued me was it lists an ad from somebody who, a Mrs. J.W. Newbold in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, is advertising in the Burlington Free Press, looking for descendants of Simon Bradford, a couple of other Bradfords, but Alan and Deborah Smith, all born in Vermont, living 1800 to 1850. She claims descendants are eligible to be members of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and that a Bradford genealogy is being compiled. So it would be worth it to search. I mean, the Daughters of the American Revolution have an excellent website. It would be a little hit or miss because you'd have to luck out and hopefully find somebody who descends from Alan and Deborah Smith, who can make this connection back to somebody who served in the Revolutionary War. But from this ad, it looks like that's possible to do. The other thing to do would be to try to find this Bradford genealogy that, now this is a newspaper ad in 1931. So an early Bradford genealogy, if that actually got published, it might still be available somewhere online. Or not online, then the actual book maybe in a library somewhere, Library of Congress, for example, something like that. One of my pre-pandemic favorite things to do actually was to go down to Boston for the New England Historical and Genealogical Society, because they have an entire floor of their library is nothing but family genealogies. So that would be a place I would go to look. They've been doing a year-long renovation, so I don't know when they're going to open that up again. But again, if it was me looking, I would go look to see if I could find that Bradford genealogy and see if there's any information there about Alan and Deborah Smith. My other thought was to look for town histories. Because the Bradford family lived in Springfield. This is a page out of the Springfield town history, and it lists very helpfully here early marriages. So one of the things, in this case, the book is online, so you can, once you open up the book, you can search, you can just use find, your find feature off your computer. So I searched on Smiths, and as you can see, several of them popped up here. I was really because they're all in chronological order. So I was really hoping to find Ralph in there, but he wasn't in any of it. However, a couple of Smiths here, if Ralph is the son of Deborah Smith, these other two Smith women are her sisters, Parthenia and Tryphenia, and it listed their marriages, but no luck finding Ralph. I mean, there's no way to know for sure that he was in Springfield, but as I said, the theory that I was trying to prove was that Alan and Deborah might have been his parents, and that if I could find them, or I could maybe actually find Ralph's marriage, but again, no luck there. The town histories a lot of times do have genealogies in them. They're not particularly well documented usually, but I've gotten a lot of good hints from looking at town histories. So anyway, those are just my rather frustrating search for anything about the Smith family. So the only other advice I guess I could add to that is just to continue the search. Be sure to keep track of what you have found, especially if something, you want to keep track, especially of any known information that looks solid, and move from there into things that you don't know about. In this case, and probably in a lot of cases, you probably need to go beyond what is online. Although, as we were talking earlier, things are constantly being added to databases, online databases. So it's sometimes worth it to go back and check something that you might have already searched, but just to see if something new has been added. So then beyond that, it involves going to an archive or courthouses or libraries and so forth. And in this case, it might even be worth it to do DNA testing. If you can find other relatives that you might not even know about, sometimes the DNA testing can reveal work that other people have done and give you a connection to find what you're looking for. So anyway, let me stop the sharing here. And I usually like to have more closure, if you will, actually find some of the information that we're looking for. But if anybody has other ideas about what you would search, I'm open to it. Again, it's not my problem really. I was just trying to help somebody else at the library, but well, I guess what I'm looking for is if anybody has had a really difficult one to solve and how you were successful, how did you solve it? And what happened for anybody?
I'll throw one out there, Wayne. I'll throw out one
All right.
possibility. Well, this Mrs. J.W. Newbold at from Pleasant, Iowa, maybe track her descendants to see
Oh,
if they own the Bradford genealogy, because she might have just have it in manuscript form but never published it, and
yeah,
it might have
that
been
could be
passed down
true.
through the family. I mean, that's just an idea, but
Yeah,
should be fairly direct to find her maybe obituary and then find some descendants to track down. But
yeah, I
or
should
and
pass
yeah,
that
if you're
on. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
and
good
then
idea.
it might have ended up in a local, as you say, a local repository like the public library there or something. But anyway, yeah, great job. That was it's like banging your head against the wall, right?
Yeah, and this one for sure. I thought I'm going to be able to find something about these
Yeah,
people. And I'm not
right.
even sure. There's huge gaps in those kids.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
Yeah.
well, that look like they might be kids. So
Yeah,
there's probably a lot more to be found. It's
yeah,
difficult, but
right.
I mean, Smith is such a common
Yeah,
name,
yeah,
but
exactly.
fortunately, well, the one that I really would have liked to have found was in that 1850 census. There was one of the people listed there was a daughter. Well, what I thought was maybe a daughter, Mary, and if that was the case, she would have been the oldest daughter. But like searching for Mary Smith was, I mean, it felt like a episode of CSI or something where they had an unknown person. They just called her Mary Smith, Jane
Right.
Doe.
Yeah, the other idea I had, but you're looking at mid 1850s, is the other censuses that were taken during the time, like the agricultural census.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Now, whether because whether or not New York might have had something in 1855 as well that might give you another access point for the Smith family. I used the agricultural census here in Vermont for someone, but I had to go to the Department of Libraries. They had it. It wasn't online. They had it on microfilm, I think, and they were able to look up. And that's an incredible, rich resource because it tells you a lot about the household. You
Oh,
know
right.
how
Yeah.
many potatoes they harvested and apples and whatever else. Um, Anyway,
Yeah.
again, that would have been
I've done
that
some of
would
that with my own family, like
yeah,
on great great grandfather. And you could you could really get a sense of what his life was like, basically. I mean, he
yeah,
was a farmer, so I mean,
yeah. Farmers,
what
right?
his farm was like. It was very detailed, like, how
They
much
are
honey they made, how much maple syrup they produced, how
right.
many acres of
Yeah, exactly.
uh, land they had, and so forth.
Yeah, they're neat to look at.
Harry, Wayne, are those agricultural censuses available in other states, say in Massachusetts?
They may or
Uh,
may not be, but I would try.
So
Hey,
would you like Google agricultural census
uh,
year, or
what is
how
it
would
called?
you?
Non-population
yeah,
schedules
No,
non-population schedules, right?
okay,
So
and
yeah, look
agriculture.
on
Uh, it-
Ancestry first and Family Search
yeah, I
first.
was going to say in Ancestry, you probably can find them.
okay.
Yeah,
It's a federal census, so I would think
yeah,
it would be you could find that in Massachusetts.
So it's a
It would probably
non-population.
most likely like 1860, 1870,
Uh,
1880,
uh,
late 1800s would be when they did that.
I think I'll use that to check out, see if I can get some more info on
yeah,
a number of ancestors. And thank
yeah.
you also,
If
Wayne.
you have a hard time, if you have a hard time finding where they are, just shoot us an email and we'll see if we can, you know, come up with it.
Thank
There,
you.
there won't be any information in there. I mean, the only information about will be the name of the, well, usually it's a
The-
male, usually
Right.
the owner of the farm. And in those
Right.
days, it was mostly men.
Yeah.
And like I said, it won't be information about the family. It'll be information about what they owned.
Mhm.
but very detailed. I
Yeah.
mean, how many cows they had, how many pigs
Right.
they raised, how many chickens,
Yeah.
they sold, and, you know, like,
Yeah. And it's about land, it's about land and the productivity on the land. But that then raises another question. Land records, will give you that as well. If you can find some land records, sales of property and
Mhm.
that sort of thing.
Great. And Wayne, I think it's
Yeah.
also an interesting clue to explore siblings if you can't find
Yeah.
exactly what you're looking for a particular person to when you I don't know, I think it's interesting.
yeah, if
Yeah.
that Smith family, if it was something I was researching, I would try to find out who all those other people were in that earliest record. The earliest one I found, 1850, where they were named, and even beyond that, there are other people in that household in the previous census records, but they're only numbers. So if you came up with a name, you'd have to do it kind of indirectly. In other words, to really go into it, you need to find, well, hopefully if you can, if you found birth, death, marriage records, and then beyond that, find a probate record to see if they left anything in a will to somebody else in the family, that kind of thing. But yeah, if I was doing that, I would try to dig out as much as I could about those other the other family members, the other kids.
Right. And those early census, if you start paging the census, going forwards and backwards by page, you might come across other surnames, similar surnames, which means that they may have been related and their land was contiguous to one another, which might give you some hint as well. Even though you don't get members of a household, you'd get perhaps brothers and fathers or something. Yeah,
A
Michael.
couple of questions about fold 3. You said there's a free week. Is that coming up or the one that we're just ending?
Yeah, no, right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I put the link in the chat.
Now
they've
through
Memorial Day,
May
right?
20th, I think it was. Let me
Yeah.
just.
And you also mentioned
Yeah.
that they're putting some Civil War records on. Do they have much on the Revolutionary War or at this point?
Oh yeah. If there were, well, especially if there's Civil War pension records are. I'm not Civil War. Well, Civil War pension records are the ones they're digitizing now, or they were in the last few years. Revolutionary War pension records are already online. So yeah, you definitely, if you find those, you can find some really interesting stuff in there. Because like I said, they had to, well, I mean, it's the US government. You had to prove everything.
Right. Yeah,
they weren't going to just give you a pension. You had to prove that you served, where you served, who you served with. And like I said, if you were the widow, then you had to go through another extensive proof to show that you were married, and when and where you were married and how long you've been married and so forth. So
I put in the chat. I put a link to the Fold 3 free access link, and also sometimes it's hard to figure out at National Archives, because their database is pretty extensive. But I had it bookmarked how to request copies of older military service records. There's a link directly to that page there. So if you want, you can bookmark it if you.
Yeah, now I just was double checking. It's available right now through May 20th. Fold 3.
So it's only a couple days.
So, well, just for Memorial Day.
Yeah. Anybody have any other? It looks like somebody has posted something on the chat, Hannah. One major relative in our family in Bellows Falls is in question as to where he is buried. We've gone to the funeral home and got maps that help, but we found out there were burials back then of 2 people in one plot back in the late 1800s, but still can't find the answer. That's your bailiwick, Wayne.
That it's McAuliffe, and we've done a lot of searches and gone places. I've done tons of work on this, but the cemetery in Bellows Falls, which is on the Westminster Terrace, where the St. Charles, the Catholic cemetery, took its origins, and they moved and they actually took some of those plots, those people, and buried them in St. Charles later on, but it started there on the Westminster Terrace. And so those are very, very old. And there is the funeral home gave us a map that said, well, could be here. There's a McAuliffe there, and there's some over here, but over here with only one name said there's 4 people buried there. But we cannot find a great-great-grandfather where he's buried. We know his death date, and his birth date in Cork, Ireland, but we don't know where he's buried and with his wife. And maybe we know his wife, but we don't know. It's Rockingham at the time they called it. They didn't call it Bellows Falls, but we can't find where he's buried.
Have you checked with the town clerk?
Yep, been there, done, just searched all those records.
I was going to say, they have a bunch of records,
Yeah.
records in the town clerk's office.
They couldn't help us. I spent days and days there, ancestry, other relatives, other people doing searches. And then we can only think that maybe he's buried there in one of those 2 graves with 4 people in it.
Huh.
Yeah, Jim Howard has something to say about it. Jim, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any cemetery in Westminster Terrace. That's where I grew up and lived for 20 years. But there were Catholics buried in Westland Cemetery.
That's what I mean. No, that's over in, where's that?
That's over near where the old swimming pool was, and I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay.
Towards Gageville.
Well, that's what I mean by the West.
Okay. Yeah, because I had relatives buried there originally that were then moved to St. Charles Cemetery in Westminster.
That's the one I meant. Yeah.
All right.
I call it Westminster Terrace. Yeah, can't find it.
Wow.
And he's the only one missing, but of course it all goes back to Cork, Ireland, and we got a lot more information.
Yeah. What is the date of his death?
April 12th, 1884 in Rockingham. So
Was there no newspaper mention?
No, and of course I also went up to the town meeting house, but it wouldn't be there either.
Right.
No. Even my husband's relatives, a couple older brothers, nobody can find it.
When did cremation start? Does anybody know? I mean, modern cremation, not ancient, but
Catholics couldn't be cremated. I don't think.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kind of curious about when that actually started.
Didn't that get more prevalent at the Civil War era? I remember reading that.
Okay. That's possible. Yeah. That'd make an interesting topic to research.
Yeah.
Were you able to find, in terms of finding when they came to this country, did you find a ship?
No.
Ship manifest?
There's some guesses. We're not sure. We think it was probably in the 30s and 40s, 1800 30s and 40s. The potato famine drove them over.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But I've been doing my work here, and I keep going from my side of the family to my husband's side of the family. And I've done, gone places, I'm writing my family history, and I got thousands of pages already of a huge story. I'll never publish it, but it's going to be for my boys when I'm gone. And it's a great story, but there's still missing pieces. But 95-year-old relatives with their minds have helped a little bit. Those who have their minds still. And
Well-
Ellis Island and all that kind of stuff I went through, so.
Well, you
But-
should at least deposit the manuscript somewhere, and it
It's
would help
huge.
someone like Wayne when they run across.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
started this when I started my family history when I was, I decided I'd put my pictures in order, and I did that. And then it just started sinking in, and I went to Florida for the winter. And I wrote an introduction to a story and I'm a writer anyway, and I wrote an introduction to the story that I never thought I would do anything with. And from there, I have continued every day for 4 years now, and my 4 sisters and then I've spewed questions out to them because perceptions of each of us differ a bit, but we're all still talking about who and what happened where and how it happened, and then I did Polish ancestry because that's where I'm from, and put it all together into a story that led to our whole history. But I don't think I'll publish it. I don't know. It's so darn long and I keep going over it, but it's fun.
If you have it, you have it on a computer? I mean, you've
I sure do.
typed it up there? I mean,
I've got
really
it. It's thousands of pages long now, and I just keep going, and I can type really fast. So that's why I do it that way.
Well, I was saying, it's really pretty cheap to publish a book these days.
Yeah, Wayne has done it several times.
I mean, I have a 500-page plus genealogy that I've been working on the last few years, and it costs like $10 to have it printed,
Well, see, I don't want to print it because what's happened is I've added
Changes.
historical information as well from sometimes I Googled in books, and I haven't always footnoted, and I've said that in the very beginning that I'm not footnoting to publish, but I've added historical information that's going on at the time and added that as part of the story. So it's a story. It's more a story than genealogy, but it's that too.
Yeah.
I'm having very much fun with it though. It takes a lot of my time, but I love it.
I hope you're backing it up.
Well, I did. I have a big backup that I have that on, and I have it on another thing, and yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I just keep going, and it's all the good and all the bad of the family too. My son said, if you're going to do it with the bad stuff too. So the bad stuff is there, and there's lots of bad stuff every family has.
Well, that makes it a more interesting story too.
Yeah, I've read parts and dictated parts and shared it with all my sisters and everything, and they're laughing and they're crying. It is fun.
Well, that's great.
Sounds
But
like you got to
there's
win.
pieces missing. Yeah, but like I say, there's pieces missing. But
Yeah.
as far as going back to Poland, you can't get anything hardly over there before, well, the end of World War I, and when Poland got smashed to pieces, and now look what's
Right.
over there. But yeah. Anyway, so the other part, McAuliffe, is missing, and I don't know what I'm going to do there. Keep searching, I guess.
That's right. Keep doing
Yeah, I
it.
don't know.
You
Some of those
never know
older-
when you'll break through.
Yeah,
Someone will
that's what
pop
I'm
up.
gonna do. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Um,
thinking I tried to help somebody with that same thing, that there's a Catholic cemetery that's near the Oak Hill Cemetery.
that one,
No
Wrestling, yeah.
Falls, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of missing headstones and so forth.
Yeah,
in there.
what's his name down at the funeral home drew us a map. We walked up there one day and found that one with 4 bodies, but missing pieces, and it's so hard. But
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
yeah. Anyway, thank you. That
Looks
was
like-
Thank you.
Rhonda, you had a question?
Yeah.
Oh, hey Wayne, it's me, Doug.
Yeah.
I was overhearing your guys' thing. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I
No,
just
that's fine.
had a quick question for you as I was cleaning the apartment. I overheard you say something about Christians couldn't be cremated.
Yeah,
Catholics.
Oh, Catholic.
Catholics.
Can I ask why? I was just curious.
Anybody know?
I don't know
Not
why.
Catholic.
I think it has to do with the whole Bible and the whole Christian philosophy of you can't denigrate the body by burning it up like that. I don't really know.
Oh, okay. I was just curious.
They probably related it to paganism or something
Yeah.
too. Something,
My
you know.
God,
But
now
no,
we gotta save,
I think you're
we
right.
gotta
Yeah.
save space now. Cremation is good.
Okay, well, I'm gonna let you guys get back to.
Uh,
Oh,
All right,
no, that's all
thanks.
right. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no problem.
I think the fellow John Martin, who had a question about doing French Canadian research, I think he's not on anymore. Are you still here, John? I think he might have dropped off. 'Cause we had
I'm
some.
still on.
Oh,
Yes.
you're there. Cool. Okay, great. I didn't see you. So we were talking about that a little bit before we got live here, and we were wondering where this great grandfather, the location in Quebec. Did you said you searched parish records and so forth? What's
The information is somewhat vague. I found birth records, I found census records, but no death records have been found either by myself or others in the family who've done searches. He lived in St. Denis,
okay?
and there is some speculation that he died in St. Ours, which is Ours. I've searched parish records for both of those, and we do have a reported date of death, not specific, but the year. However, in looking at a baptismal record of his youngest daughter, we can identify that he was alive at that date, and about 5 years later, he's missing from the census records. So that's about as definitive as we've been able to get. And interestingly, the story that's been passed down through the generations was that he was killed in a train accident where he was struck by a train.
Oh, huh.
Boy, I would have thought something like that'd be in the newspapers.
Yeah, for sure.
I did
mean,
search newspaper records for, the name or the words train and killed and that sort of thing, but didn't come up with anything there either.
Oh, well,
What about perhaps the archives for the railroad itself? They must have an accident record, or any incident like that. I would think if you could locate that.
That's something I hadn't thought of. However, I'm not sure what is available in Canada. That's been the other problematic thing.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out. Most of them are handwritten notes or records, and it's hard to even distinguish what the writing says, and it's all in French.
Yeah, I know it's a bigger challenge. Are you familiar with the Vermont Genealogy Library in Essex Junction?
I'm not.
Yeah, they're primarily a French Canadian library with a lot of French Canadian sources, including the Druin collection, which is exclusively, for the most part, French Canadian database. They have their own separate database system. Hey, Wayne, could you mute Rhonda?
I got it.
tried to keep muting her, but she unmutes herself. So, any rate, so that might be a possibility, and I can put the link in the chat there. They are membership only, $40 a year, but that gives you access to their databases, and I think they have volunteers that'd probably be willing to work on some questions too, especially if you're a member, or you can just go there and use the library. It's a physical library, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A couple of other things I did do. There's 2 Facebook groups in Quebec or are for
Oh,
Quebec.
yeah. Yeah, those are
And-
good too.
And they seem pretty interested and willing to help searches, although nothing has come up yet.
Come up yet, yeah. Or a genealogy society. I did some work in Manitoba for a client, and the Manitoba Genealogy Society had a lot of resources that the Archives of Canada didn't have, nor did the local municipal archives. So that might be another. Usually they're on Facebook as well. So you should have probably come across the society, but might be worth checking specifically for that as well.
Yeah, so far I've just hit dead ends. So
Yeah.
everyone else appears to be pretty easy to find information on. It's just this one person.
Yeah, some ancestors just refuse, being found. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Getting back to the cremation issue, I've been doing some quick searches online. I was wrong. Civil War was when embalming sort of became more important, getting bodies back to home and stuff. But it said cremation started to become more prevalent in Europe in the 1870s. So that actually not too much longer after that.
Yeah.
And as far as Catholics, many believe that cremation prevented the possibility of the body being resurrected. The Catholic belief that followers of Christ will one day be raised up with for the new life, to the new life. So I guess
okay. So
reasoning there.
So there was a rational, kind of reason for that.
A religious reason, yeah.
Right. Oh, thanks. Okay. Anybody else have any comments, questions, ideas? Ideas for future presentations?
Yeah, we could use ideas.
Yeah. Hannah, if you ever want to talk about your process of writing a book, you're more than welcome to do something for us. So
yeah, I'll think about that.
Yeah, sure.
I could read like just the introduction, but whatever. So I'll put some thought behind it.
Yeah, sure. And we can schedule for some future date.
Yeah.
At some point.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Well, we're recording this, so once it gets kind of edited a little bit, I'll put it up on our YouTube page, and you can subscribe to that YouTube page. So when something goes up on it, you'll get a notification. And also, we put our PowerPoints and so forth in a folder on Google Drive, so you can then access those. Michael, you willing? Do you want to share yours or not? You're muted.
Yeah, sure. I will send it to you. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And Wayne, you'll probably you're willing to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, I have to say that I lived across the street from a Ralph Smith.
Right.
Everybody does.
Probably his great grandson.
Sure.
Came back to Vermont.
I don't know what his middle name was. He worked for the railroad.
It's funny. I was searching because there was a census done in 1771.
Yeah, Cumberland County.
But the Smith family doesn't appear there, so they must have moved.
Yeah.
Or at least that's I'm not even sure it's the same one, but the Smith family that was in Springfield must have arrived shortly after that.
Yeah, F. Scott Bartley, he is a major genealogist in the area. You mentioned his early Vermont settlers book.
Yeah.
And I've communicated with him. He's very helpful. I don't know. I mean, he might be willing to help.
Well, I've passed the information. I've given the information to people who are
yeah. That's not
asked. So I'm leaving it up to them to follow it up. But I gave them.
Another thing that is interesting is a lot my relatives came, as I said, from Poland, and their name is so hard to pronounce and spell. they would often change them to simple names like Smith or Johnson when they couldn't, coming over on the boat. So that's where it all got messed up too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it much more complicated if they
Yeah.
changed the name.
But it didn't get messed up at Ellis Island. That's a genealogy.
We had some mess up there. Our family did.
Well, it's after that, because what they did, they took the manifest.
Yeah.
That's what, so it did, names changed. I mean, particularly in my case, being Italian,
Yeah.
they really got
Yeah.
changed, which is wreaked havoc with my dual citizenship application. Wayne has heard this story many times.
Have you heard anything yet, Jerry?
Oh, no, it's,
No.
I've submitted all the documentation, and it's sitting, I think it's sitting in a basket somewhere, either in Boston or in Italy, so I don't know which, but
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm holding my
Well.
breath. But, I mean, everything that's there. I mean, I kind of figure no news is good news. They're not asking me for more information. So I think
Good.
that's a positive sign.
Well, it's going to be, we need to hear the end of that story.
Yeah, definitely.
When you finally, when you finally get it.
I'll flash my EU passport on the screen.
Yeah, there you go.
You didn't get my drift.
Oh, dear.
Okay, guys.
Well, I don't know. I guess we've kind of wrapped it up here, haven't we?
Yeah, I think so. So hopefully if you're around on August 10th, we'll be up at the History Fair. At least that's our plan.
Where is that?
It's in Newfane at the county courthouse grounds.
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be stuff in the newspaper, and we'll send out another email. So
Good.
yeah, it's fun. They have lots of things going on, exhibits, demonstrations of one sort or another, and tours of the county courthouse, which is really neat. And may even give us a tour of the jail that is now their new digs.
Great.
Okay.
All righty.
Thanks again, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Take
See you.
care.
See you later. Take care. Have a good.
Bye.